Hi folks! So thanks for submitting your first book summaries. I'm going to get to responding to those between today and Wednesday. I wanted to stop to talk a little bit about sources in general and to kind of put the number of sources and the types of sources that you're looking for the final paper in better context. So I'm going to talk you through a brief slideshow here to talk about issues of sourcing. So I call this taking stock of sources because even here at the very beginning, you want to organize your research. You want to know what you're looking for and be thoughtful about the sources that you're going to select. The minimums that you need to gather for the paper are 3 book sources, 3 scholarly article sources, 3 website sources, and 1 video or interview. When it comes to evaluating your sources, we started talking about this a little bit in discussion. There's a number of different qualities that you might be looking for. Let me go through them each briefly. Relevance is just the question, does this source really relate to my paper? You want to avoid straining to work in sources that don't really quite fit. So, ideally the books, the websites, the articles that you're looking at are going to be directly about your topic. Reliability is the question of basic accuracy. Is this a trustworthy source? But the larger question is actually probably authority, which is not just is this accurate, but what gives this person, this website, this book, whatever it is, the right to talk on this particular topic. You want to make sure that you're getting sources from genuine experts. Now, when it comes to trade books, like books that have been published as physical books, this is generally not too much of an issue for most topics because most presses, make sure that their authors have authority. If you're looking at ebooks or self-published books, the question of authority could be a little bit of a bigger question. And certainly for websites, the question of authority is a big one. So you want to do a little bit of investigative research, be a little bit of a detective about exactly who it is behind your sources, and just make sure that they have a good authority to speak. Then the next criteria is depth. Contrary to popular belief, there is probably nothing wrong with things like Wikipedia or SparkNotes or GradeSaver type sources, okay? Or I guess I could say that the only thing that's wrong with them is that they're shallow. They're just not very in-depth, okay? So even when their accuracy isn't at question, and many times they may be perfectly accurate, they don't make good sources for a lengthy final research paper because the whole point is that by the end of the research paper, you're supposed to be an expert. You're supposed to be working with other experts, right? So generally those sources are not going to be in-depth enough. You want to pay attention to, for example, whether your source is lengthy enough to require downloading, maybe, if you're looking at a website. So issues of depth are somewhat important. Timeliness is going to be important. You're going to want to decide how far back to start your topic. Like, do you want to talk about the history of your topic at all, or do you want to start in the present day? Obviously, if you have a scientific or medical topic, then it's especially important that your sources be timely. In general, people should try to work with sources from the last 5 years whenever that's possible. And then the last thing is source variety. People have been going back and forth a little on the discussion boards about whether opinion-based sources are okay. So let me disambiguate, or let me kind of clarify that question with another slide talking about source variety. What you want to make sure you do in a research paper is provide evidence for all the different claims that you're making. And there's lots of different kinds of evidence. Certainly data and statistics and what we might think of as hard facts are important to research, and everyone's paper should include some of those. But it is perfectly fine to have some anecdotal evidence or what we might call a personal account. It's also fine to have opinion-based evidence. In fact, it would be pretty difficult probably to write most research papers without having some degree of opinion in there. What you want to look for in evaluating opinion-based research is the stuff, backed with logical reasoning and explanation. Okay, so did the person explain why they think the things they think? And does that explanation make sense? If those qualities are present, then it's probably fine to use anecdotal or opinion-based evidence in your paper, so long as you have some other things in there as well. And then there are forms of evidence that people don't always think of right off the bat that can be useful for plugging holes in your paper. You might look at historical precedents. Again, the question, how far back in time do you want to begin your topic? A hypothetical or a thought experiment where you start with a what if and kind of pose a scenario that you make up that somehow illustrates your topic, or you find someone that's posed a scenario in their research on your topic. A case study or a profile, which is just taking a topic and taking one particular person that relates to the topic and really talking through that situation. Opinion sampling or polling can be kind of interesting. And then sometimes it makes sense to compare your topic to something that someone else would understand better. And that's where a useful comparison might come in. So these are all different kinds of varieties of evidence, and ideally you want to use as many of these as you can. So once you get late in your research, then it will be time to consider, well, okay, gee, most of my paper is based on statistics, so I probably want to try to look for some personal accounts to balance it out. Or, I've got, 8 pages of material, but I'm a little bit short. Could I go back and find an opinion poll that might add a new angle? Or could I offer a thought experiment? Okay, so come back to these varieties of evidence, and I'll try to put this PowerPoint back in front of you again late in the process as well. And then my last point for today is that once you start gathering your sources and you have a bunch of them, it's not too early to start to consider where in the paper you're going to cover what. So you're going to need some sources early in the paper that provide background. You're going to need some in the middle of the paper that support your claims. That's where your main evidence comes in. And then late in the paper, this is where you probably want to talk about complications, additional questions. You might want to introduce opposition or people that disagree with you so you can talk about the other side of your issue. So start to give some thought to where in your paper you want each of these sources to go, even as you're working on summarizing the sources.